The rain had not stopped since morning, and by the time Elena Voss reached the iron gates of the Blackthorn estate, her boots were soaked through, and her hands were numb with cold. She had traveled 3 days by bus and on foot to reach this place, carrying nothing but a small leather pouch and a folded letter that her grandmother had pressed into her hands just before she passed. "Give this to the pack," her grandmother had whispered, her voice thin as paper. "Tell them Marion Voss is gone. That is all. Do not stay longer than you must." Elena had never understood why her mother's family had left this world behind, why she had grown up in a small apartment in the city, raised on stories that never quite made sense until she was old enough to notice the moon pulling at something inside her chest. She was 26 years old and had spent her whole life feeling like a stranger in her own skin. Only in the last few years had she learned the truth. She was a wolf, untrained, unclaimed, and utterly alone in a world that had rules she did not know. She had come only to deliver a message. Nothing more. The gates opened before she even knocked, as if the estate itself had been waiting for her. A tall man in a dark coat led her silently through a garden path lit by lanterns, past stone statues of wolves frozen mid-howl, and into a grand hall that took her breath away. The ceiling arched high above her, carved with symbols she did not recognize, and at the far end stood a throne, carved from black wood, polished until it gleamed like glass. The hall was full. Dozens of men and women stood in small groups, dressed in fine clothing, their conversations quiet and controlled. Elena felt every eye turn toward her the moment she stepped inside. She smelled of rain and long travel, and she knew, without being told, that she did not belong here. At the center of it all sat a man who did not need a crown to look like a king. Damien Cross rose from his throne, with the slow, deliberate movement of someone who had never once doubted his own authority. He was broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, with eyes the color of storm clouds. When he looked at her, Elena felt something in the room shift, as though the very air had grown heavier. "Who let a stranger into my hall?" His voice was calm, but it carried across the room like a blade drawn from its sheath. "My name is Elena Voss," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her hands. "I have a message. My grandmother asked me to deliver it." "Marion Voss has passed away." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Somewhere near the back, an old woman gasped and pressed a hand to her mouth, but Damien's expression did not change. "Voss." He said the name, as though tasting something bitter. That name left this pack a long time ago, and not on good terms. Why would her granddaughter dare walk back into this hall, uninvited, unannounced, smelling like she does not even know what she is? Elena's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "I did not come to ask for anything. I came to deliver a message, as I was asked. I will leave as soon as it is done." Damien studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved over her plain, rain-soaked clothes, her tired face, the way she stood without the practiced grace of the pack-born. Whatever he saw did not impress him. "You are no Luna," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You do not carry yourself like one. You do not know our laws, our customs, our history. You are an outsider, playing at something you do not understand. Deliver your message, and go." Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, quiet but cruel. Elena felt the sting of it deep in her chest, but she refused to let her eyes fill with tears in front of these people. She had endured worse than mockery. She bowed her head slightly, the way her grandmother had taught her, a simple gesture of respect that cost her nothing. "I understand," she said quietly. "I only came to deliver the message. I never claimed to be anything else." She turned to leave, her heart pounding, wanting nothing more than to be back out in the rain, away from these staring eyes and this cold, beautiful room that had made it clear she was not wanted. She had taken only 3 steps when the floor beneath her feet began to hum. At first she thought it was her own dizziness, the exhaustion of days of travel catching up to her all at once. But then she saw the lanterns along the walls flicker, and she heard someone near the throne gasp aloud. The hum grew into something deeper, a vibration that seemed to rise up from the stone itself and settle into her bones like a heartbeat that was not her own. She turned back, confused, and found that the room had changed. An older man near the front of the crowd swayed on his feet, his knees buckling beneath him as though some invisible hand had pressed down on his shoulders. He did not fall in pain. He knelt, slowly, deliberately, his head bowing low, and beside him a woman did the same. Then another, and another. Elena stood frozen as the kneeling spread through the hall like a wave moving across water, wolf after wolf, lowering themselves to the floor, some looking stunned, others afraid, all of them unable to resist whatever force moved through them. Within moments, every person in the great hall had bent their knee, their heads bowed toward her, the stranger they had just laughed at. Whispers rose from the kneeling crowd, urgent and disbelieving. The blood of the first Luna. It cannot be. That bloodline has been lost for generations. Look at her eyes. Look at the mark on her wrist. Elena looked down at her own wrist, where a faint silver marking she had always assumed was a birthmark seemed to glow softly beneath her skin, pulsing in time with the hum that still moved through the floor. She had no idea what was happening. She only knew that dozens of strangers who had mocked her only moments ago were now kneeling before her, unable to rise, their wolves responding to something ancient and undeniable, buried in her blood. Panic rose in her chest, tangled together with a strange, quiet awe. At the front of the hall, Damien Cross remained standing. His jaw was tight, his hands curled into fists at his sides, and Elena could see the effort written across every line of his body as he fought against the same force that had brought his entire pack to their knees. Sweat broke out along his brow, his legs trembled. For a proud king who had never once been forced to bow to anyone, the sensation must have been unbearable. "No," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I am the Alpha King. I do not kneel." But his body did not listen to his pride. Slowly, agonizingly, his knees bent, and the great Alpha King of the 12 packs sank to the floor before the woman he had dismissed as nothing only minutes before. The hall fell utterly silent, save for the sound of the wind outside and the soft, steady hum that still filled the air. Elena stood alone in the center of it all, the only person left standing, surrounded by an entire pack bowed low before her. She did not feel triumphant. She felt terrified. "Please," she said, her voice shaking, "someone tell me what is happening. I don't understand any of this." An elderly woman near the front, the same one who had gasped at the mention of Marion Voss, lifted her head just enough to speak, though she remained kneeling. "Child, you carry the blood of the first Luna, the founder of our pack, generations before any of us were born. Her bloodline was thought lost when your mother left. The old law says that whoever carries her blood commands the loyalty of every wolf in the 12 packs. Even the Alpha King is bound by that law." Elena's mind raced back through every strange story her grandmother had told her, stories she had dismissed as bedtime tales meant to entertain a lonely child. She remembered a name mentioned only once, in a hushed voice, late at night, the first Luna. She had never imagined it was real, let alone that it had anything to do with her. "I didn't ask for this," Elena whispered, mostly to herself. "I only wanted to give you a message and go home." Damien lifted his head then, though his knee remained bent against his will. His stormy eyes met hers, and for the first time since she had entered the hall, there was no arrogance in them, only a raw, searching confusion that mirrored her own. "You truly did not know," he said. It was not quite a question. "No," Elena said honestly. "I grew up thinking I was the only strange thing in my family. I found out I was a wolf only a few years ago. I don't know your laws. I don't know your history. I don't know how to lead anyone." Something in Damien's expression shifted, the hard lines of his face softening just slightly. He studied her for a long moment, as though seeing her clearly for the first time, past the rain-soaked clothes and tired eyes, to whatever it was that had made an entire hall of proud wolves bow without question. "The law does not care whether you know it or not," he said quietly. "Blood does not ask permission, it simply is." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its earlier coldness. "I was wrong to dismiss you the way I did. I judged you before I understood who you were. That was my mistake, not yours." Elena felt her throat tighten. She had expected many things when she walked through those gates, but not this. Not a room full of people kneeling before her, and certainly not an apology from the very king who had humiliated her minutes before. "I don't want a throne," she said softly, loud enough for the hall to hear. "I don't want power I didn't ask for and don't know how to use. I only wanted to know where I came from. I came here for my grandmother, not for any of this." The old woman near the front spoke again, her voice gentle. "Child, the law does not require you to want it, but it also does not require you to rule alone, or to rule the way others expect. Blood gives you the right to be heard. What you choose to do with that right is yours to decide." Slowly, as the hum in the floor began to fade, the wolves throughout the hall started to rise, though many kept their eyes lowered out of respect, uncertain how to behave in front of someone whose very existence had rewritten what they believed about their own history. Damien rose last of all, standing tall once more, though something in the way he held himself had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter and more thoughtful. He walked toward her slowly, stopping a respectful distance away, and extended his hand, not as a king demanding submission, but as someone offering a truce. "I cannot undo what I said," he told her, "but I can promise to listen from here forward, if you will allow it. Whatever this bloodline means for you, for me, for this pack, I would rather face it honestly than pretend the law does not exist." Elena looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. She thought of her grandmother, of the years spent not understanding who she was, of the quiet loneliness that had followed her through every day of her life until now. She thought of the message she had come to deliver, finished now, and the choice that stood before her, one she had never expected to have to make. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted, "but I would rather figure it out honestly too." Around them, the hall remained quiet, the storm outside beginning to ease into a gentle rain. The wolves who had once laughed at a stranger now watched with something closer to respect, perhaps even hope, as their alpha king stood beside the granddaughter of Marion Voss, two people who had started the evening as strangers and ended it bound together by something neither of them had chosen, but both of them were now willing to face. Elena Voss had come to Blackthorn Hall only to deliver a message. She left it having discovered a truth about herself that would change everything, not with a crown or a throne, but with the quiet, steady understanding that sometimes the things we never ask for are the very things that show us who we truly are.